Hello, it is Thursday the 18th of December 2025 and this is the rundown of yesterday's Prime Minister's questions. The session opened with Keir Starmer condemning the anti-Semitic attacks at Bondi Beach and Heaton Park, noting both were timed to coincide with Jewish holy days. He said he'd spoken with the Community Security Trust, the Home Office and the Chief Rabbi about keeping people safe over Hanukkah. Labour's Melanie Ward followed by raising the situation of Palestinian students from Gaza who hold UK scholarships but cannot leave before their places expire. The Prime Minister said he wanted them to be able to take up their places but did not set out a route for how that would happen, and instead pointed to the medical evacuation scheme bringing injured children to the UK as an example of the help Britain is providing. Kemi Badenoch then warned that Islamic extremism posed a wider threat to Western civilization and that solidarity with the Jewish community alone was not enough. Badenoch then moved immediately to the economy, challenging the Prime Minister on growth, unemployment and broken promises. She quoted his own line back at him that when he pulls the levers of government, nothing happens, and pressed him to explain what levers he had actually pulled. He pointed to the protection of 500 jobs at Grangemouth, which is Scotland's largest industrial site, and he also highlighted the decision to rejoin the Erasmus Student Exchange Scheme in 2027 and the passage of the Employment Rights Bill. Badenoch said none of that answered her question and accused him of raising taxes while unemployment and youth unemployment were rising. He rejected her figures and insisted 350,000 more people were in work this year. Conservative MP Nick Timothy then accused the government of overspending. The Prime Minister shot back that Timothy had left a complete mess when he worked in Downing Street. Labour's Antonia Bantz shifted to the car industry, criticising Nigel Farage for saying that Jaguar Land Rover deserved to go bust. The Prime Minister responded by pointing to Nissan's new electric Leaf investment in Sunderland as evidence that the sector still had confidence in the UK. Badenoch returned to the dispatch box, saying doctors had been given a 28.9% pay rise yet were striking again, and called for a ban on doctors' strikes. The Prime Minister condemned the strike but blamed the previous Conservative government for leaving the NHS on its knees, without addressing her demand for a ban. Labour's Liz Twist raised the death of 18-year-old Andrew Rowlands, who was killed by an unlicensed and uninsured driver, and asked what the government was doing about dangerous driving. The Prime Minister offered condolences and promised a meeting. Labour's Dave Robertson welcomed the Midland Rail Hub and asked for more frequent services between Lichfield and Birmingham. The Prime Minister said the hub would increase services at up to 15 stations, create 13,000 jobs, and confirmed rail fares were being frozen for the first time in 30 years. Liberal Democrat Ben Maguire raised the 1988 North Cornwall water poisoning scandal and ongoing sewage pollution. The Prime Minister called the original incident a terrible scandal and promised a ministerial hearing. Conservative Julian Smith raised the pressure on rural pubs facing closure because of business rates. The Prime Minister pointed to transitional support. But that was it. Labour's Abtisam Mohammed asked whether the water white paper would strengthen accountability and consider public ownership. The Prime Minister said yes to tougher accountability, confirming fines, bonus bans, and criminal investigations. Scottish National Party leader Stephen Flynn asked how the Prime Minister planned to spend his final Christmas in Downing Street. The Prime Minister criticised him for not welcoming the Grangemouth investment. Conservative John Whittingdale urged the Prime Minister to make any visit to Beijing conditional on the release of British citizen and journalist Jimmy Lai. The Prime Minister condemned Lai's conviction and said the government continued to raise the case. Independent MP Jeremy Corbyn raised concerns about remand prisoners on hunger strike. The Prime Minister said established procedures were being followed. Conservative David Mundell asked for continued support for Lockerbie families ahead of commemorations. The Prime Minister praised the community's resilience and urged Scottish authorities to consider the points raised. He also confirmed a licence to transfer £2.5 billion in frozen Russian assets from the Chelsea FC sale to support Ukraine. Labour's Lindsay Farnsworth raised the closure of 8 care homes by the reform-led Derbyshire County Council. The Prime Minister said the closures were deeply concerning and pointed to national social care funding. Labour's Neil Duncan Jordan raised concerns about changes to indefinite leave to remain rules affecting health and care workers. The Prime Minister said the rules would not change for those already settled. Labour's Sam Carling closed the session by raising extremist religious organisations spreading harmful views about women while still benefiting from charitable status. The Prime Minister said violence against women and girls was a national emergency and confirmed the updated strategy would soon be published. Stepping back from Prime Minister's questions, what stood out was how often the Prime Minister acknowledged concerns without moving into detail. Across the issues raised, such as jobs, strikes, social care, public safety, foreign policy, water reform and the treatment of women, the responses tended to stop at recognition rather than explanation. Even when pressed directly, including on whether doctors should be barred from striking, he avoided setting out a position. The overall pattern was consistent. Important questions were put on the table, but few were met with clear answers or direction. And on the points the Prime Minister did address, the updates were limited in scope. He offered a small number of concrete steps and upcoming measures, but they were presented without much detail or a sense of how they fit into a wider plan. They added some definition to the session, but they didn't resolve the broader uncertainties raised elsewhere or change the overall direction of Prime Minister's questions. That is your very brief summary of what happened in this week's Prime Minister's questions. Let me know what you think in the comments, and please remember to like, comment, subscribe, etc. Apologies that this bulletin is late. I had technical issues. But otherwise, thank you very much for listening, and I'll see you in the next one. If you want clear reporting you can trust, like, comment and subscribe. No bias, no bullshit, just the news you need.